So here we are with part 2, and maybe 3 as well, depending on how long this video gets when I begin editing it. Probably will have to get split into 3 parts, honestly. Anyway, finally the rest of the season reviewed. Starting with the first episode to air when I left 2024 and began 2025. Good thing this year will be over soon. So, episode 9, Pitch Imperfect. At Oktoberfest, Peter makes a bad throw at a knock-him-down game, which causes the whole town to ridicule and avoid him, which means he must earn everyone's respect back, and luckily Meg is there to train him. Meanwhile, Stewie and Brian become chiropractors after going to a chiropractor business at the Oktoberfest. I'm giving this one a 3 out of 10. It's one of the unfunniest episodes of the season. Really, really bad. I sometimes think about what it would be like if I made a comedy series. Would it even be good enough to air on TV? But clearly it doesn't matter because we've got stuff like this episode. With hilarious jokes like Peter having a wooden stick version of himself that's traumatized because Peter keeps it in his pants. We've got the family not knowing or caring about Meg's interest in sports. Really specific references to stuff that you may not get, and a few jokes about how chiropractors are quacks that don't even land once. We've also got universal basic guys, so clearly the bar is low with comedy right now. If you ever feel insecure about your talent, just remember this show aired. You can't be worse than it. The main plot about Peter having a bad throw is a pretty dumb retcon, because there's definitely been examples of him throwing perfectly fine before. Everyone in town making fun of him for his bad throw is not only forced, but it makes everyone unlikable. His family ignores him, his friends ditch him, and Lois is embarrassed because she has him as a husband. Why should I care about Peter trying to earn the respect back from these assholes? Meg training him could have been something more. It was one of the few things I liked about this episode, aside from 1 or 2 decent jokes. It's a good pairing, and it had a nice ending where Peter thanks her for being the only person to believe in him. But that's about it. Other than that, she just helps him train in some unfunny sequences. Not really much to it, but the ending is still something. This chiropractor subplot is possibly one of the most nothing plots I have ever bloody seen from this show. Damn, it all happens. They might as well have shown paint drying. Stewie and Brian set up an illegitimate chiropractor business where they pretend to cure people's problems so they can make easy money. Chris is there too as a receptionist. Then in the next scene afterwards, he starts up his own chiropractor business to rival Stewie and Brian's. Top tier story progression right there. Then 2 guys come in a van and they say they're here to shut down both businesses for being illegitimate. At least when that Aspel happened in the last episode, there was things actually happening in the plot. Literally nothing happens here, and then that just comes out of nowhere. On to episode 10, Hard Times at Adam West High. Chris gets an erection when he has to present a book report in class. Everyone laughs at him and continues to mock him for it for days. This causes Brian to suggest using Stewie's time machine in order to go back in time to redo the book report. But this ends up having disastrous consequences for Meg, since the laughter caused a distraction that shielded Meg's face from an exploding beaker in science class. Meanwhile, Peter becomes jealous when his friends all win on lottery scratch cards. Peter ends up stealing a bunch of the cards and goes to jail, but is bailed out by his friends. I'm giving this one a 6 out of 10. Yep, the first episode to go above a 3 out of 10. I actually really like this plot, even if it's very weird and gross, because that's pretty much Chris's whole character these days. I like this plot for a few reasons. The jokes, for starters, are actually pretty funny this time around, even the jokes they make around Chris being a horny perv, which are usually terrible. I really didn't expect them to turn the episode's events around by revealing that altering the past had severe consequences for Meg, and in a way that didn't feel contrived. And if you notice at the beginning, Meg mentions this incident and how the beaker almost blew up in her face. You expect it to be a quick joke because Peter immediately turns his attention to some peanuts. That's pretty clever, I think. I only noticed it on rewatch of this scene. Also, Meg's face being burned is actually treated with proper severity this time, unlike the Christmas episode I reviewed in part 1. Another thing I really like about this episode is Brian actually feels like Brian. Yeah, after I ranted in the last part about how old Brian is nowhere to be seen anymore, he comes back a few episodes later. The first act, which isn't as good as the rest of the episode, has him appear quite self-centered as he takes credit for Stewie's time machine, but he gets much better as the episode goes along, even giving Chris a good moral at the end about how cringy childhood mistakes can shape a person into becoming an interesting adult. I do find it weird how Chris didn't know about Stewie's time machine and had to have Brian tell him about it, even though there was a whole season 13 episode where he went into it. Peter's plot, though not nearly as good or interesting as it was a very typical jealousy plot, was still good, and it was nice to see Peter's friends use the rest of their lottery money to bail him out of jail. Makes them feel like actual friends. There was also a lot of good jokes with this plot too. My only real complaint with this episode is the ending with the Corey's World interview. Kinda lazy and not really funny, but not the worst thing ever. On to episode 11, the L Word. Glenn Quagmire begins dating the local librarian, Elle, whose name I don't think I'll say in full. Peter and the rest are confused, but soon grow to like her until Quagmire finds out that Elle is cheating on him, much to his dismay. She apologizes and says to him that she felt like doing it because he can't satisfy her. This news causes many people to make fun of Quagmire for not being able to please women, until he gets some encouraging words from the guys, making him go down to Elle's house so they can try again, which Elle agrees, and Quagmire has an orgasm-induced aneurysm. Meanwhile, Lois gives Stewie a leash after he nearly gets hit by a car, causing Brian to take pleasure in being the leash holder for once. I'm giving this a 3 out of 10. I find this one quite hard to review because it's hard to articulate how I feel about it. Once again, I like that they take a side character who doesn't get much spotlight and make an episode about her. And they really do make an episode about her, as she is really the centerpiece of this Quagmire story. What I mean is, it's mostly the characters reacting to her and not her having much real involvement in the story. She is the driving factor, but she doesn't get to do much. They set her up with Quagmire, the rest of the gang meets her, she cheats on Quagmire because she says he doesn't know how to satisfy her, and then she has sex with him in the end when he gets his, I don't know, sexual energy back or whatever. The episode is more about Quagmire and how he has to deal with not being able to satisfy her and having his ability to say giggity revoked. Which isn't like the worst plot, it's just average, nothing really to it. But yeah, it doesn't involve her as much as you think, and making her into a cheater paints her in an unsympathetic light, which is not what you want for the first major focus for a character. Revealing that she has such a strong bedroom prowess is something that develops her character a bit, so I'll give the episode that. Brian's plot sucks. It's back to shitty Brian after good Brian briefly returned last episode. Now we got Brian treating Stewie like shit with a child leash. Yes, I believe those do actually exist. I watched the episode a bit earlier before I wrote this review, but I recall him making some severely creepy requests for a flight he was booked on and making Stewie ask for them, so that scene was just awful. There might be a few other scenes like that in here as well, if I recall, but don't worry, Brian realizes he was wrong in the end up. Seen it before, next. If this subplot was ditched like it should have been because it adds nothing and isn't entertaining, then I'd probably give this episode a 4 out of 10, which is my rating to basically say it was average. On to episode 13, A Real Who's Hulu. What the hell kind of title is that? It's a Hulu anthology parodying Only Murders in the Building, The Dropout, and The Bear. Goody. I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. So because one episode parody wasn't enough, we gotta have 2. No, sorry, 4 technically, since this is 3 different parodies. The first one is fucking unfunny. What happens is there's an obvious murderer in the building who's referred to as Jeffrey Dahmer. He's got bloodstains on his clothes, bloody bin bags of legs sticking out, and the victim trying to escape through the window. And Stewie, Meg, and Brian, who are this episode's versions of whoever these characters are. I don't know, my parents watch the series, I don't notice anything suspicious about him, while having all these things I just mentioned happen right in front of them. Frustrating Donna, who is a weird choice for this episode, who keeps telling them Jeffrey is the killer. and in the end, she is the one who is arrested. The next parody is better than this one and probably the best one in the whole episode, which isn't saying much because it's still nothing of note, just a little bit funny at times. And then the next one is just a bunch of, hey, isn't that show weird? Yeah, like, what's up with it? Why is it called that? Why does it do that? But there was one joke that did get a chuckle out of me, so I guess there's that. Anyways, let's be done with these crappy parodies, please. I hate watching them and talking about them. They are the least interesting things to talk about in this ranking, and if I do a Season 24 review, I hope to have no more. By the way, Season 24 started off with an even worse Halloween special, so that should be fun if that video ever comes. On to Episode 13, China Doll. Brian buries Rupert, making Stewie have to wash him in the sink, where he discovers a label that says Rupert was made in China. Thinking that means Rupert is of Chinese descent, Stewie goes to China with Brian and Rupert, hoping to meet Rupert's parents at a Chinese toy factory. He assumes 2 assembly line workers are the parents and goes over to their place for dinner, in which he makes some jokes that upset the Chinese government, which is spying on them, leading to them being arrested in a horrible Chinese prison. Once they escape, they turn Chris in to be granted freedom. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. Another really funny episode, like consistently funny throughout the entire episode, which is rare to see for the show after its 3rd season. Stewie thinking Rupert is of Chinese descent because of a Made in China label is a pretty funny plot that harkens back to how he can be quite naive at times, still being a baby and oblivious to the world, despite how intelligent he is. The whole thing about the parents being just 2 assembly line workers, who Stewie assumes are Rupert's parents because they apparently look like him, is also really funny, especially their reactions to everything while Stewie takes it all so seriously. I quite like how the plot was set up here, and the different story beats, which is unusual for a Family Guy episode. I guess it's because this is an A-plot episode, so it has more time for that kind of thing. On to Episode 14, One Foot in Front of the Mother. After Chris becomes a star athlete, he begins running with Lois and her friends, but soon he and her friends begin to make plans excluding her, so she decides she is going to beat her son in a race in order to get her friends back. Meanwhile, Brian is given a shock collar when Quagmire complains about him barking. As revenge, Brian puts a shock collar on Quagmire while he is asleep. When Quagmire is attacked by coyotes, Brian saves him by barking and electrocuting the coyotes with his shock collar. I'm giving this a 3 out of 10. We're back to the shite. This episode focuses on 2 boring dramas that are unfunny, predictable, and really don't have anything going on. The main plot about Chris's speed walking is painfully boring, and it takes forever for something to happen. And when it does, it's just a typical person stealing your friend's away plot, with nothing you haven't seen before in the show. Chris acts arrogant while Bonnie and Donna exclude Lois from the group. That's it, nothing else going on there. When Lois finally beats him, he lets her, because he realizes she needs Bonnie and Donna more than him. And he realizes this out of nowhere, because there was no build-up to it before. I mean, he knew he was excluding her from the group, and those were her friends. What made him realize that she needed them? Was it that cafe scene where he tries one-upping her when she's clearly trying to win her friends back? Oh wait, I forgot. It was explained why. Because they don't send nudes in their group chat. Yep, who could have seen that coming? The Brian dog collar plot is yet another Brian versus Quagmire plot, and the second one of this season. Any episode involving these 2 at each other's throats is usually going to be shit, because they have no drama. There's no reason beyond a plot contrivance for them to hate each other, and all we get here is Brian being tortured by a shock collar, Quagmire relishing in it for a bit, Brian gets his revenge, and then there's an admittedly okay ending where Brian saves Quagmire from coyotes. But still, it would have been better if there was a more reasonable reason for this shock collar being given to Brian in the first place, other than the fact that he was just barking, which accidentally destroyed Quagmire's rice artwork in this Squidward-ass scene. Having a reasonable reason would make this rivalry somewhat believable instead of coming across as forced. You don't have to make Brian fucking horrible like in some other episodes. Just make it so the rivalry makes sense. Now, let's get into the comedy of this episode. It's mostly bad, not big surprise there, but I want to bring up a specific cutaway, which I think would be a good one for Worst Cutaways Part 2. This cutaway where this married man in hell is being annoyed by his wife and further annoyed when she reveals she's invited her sister. Get a fucking divorce if you're so unhappy. Talk about your relationship or something. Jeez. I'm so tired of these dumbass I hate my wife, I hate being married jokes that this show is full of. They're never fucking funny. On to episode 15. The Fat Lotus. On a trip to Bermuda at a hotel that Brian is in charge of, Peter begins neglecting Lois, causing her to start hanging out more with Quagmire, while Peter is completely oblivious, despite everyone else telling him something might be going on. Stewie begins hanging out with Bruce and his gay friends, with his new Desmond Voyage persona, but becomes worried when they tell him they're all going hiking to a volcano to make sacrifices. Meanwhile, Brian is being annoyed by Stewie, who keeps complaining about things in the hotel and being a jerk, leading to Brian getting drunk and rubbing his butt all over Stewie's room, causing him to be fired. Also, Meg and Chris steal some things at an expensive shop, and Jeffrey, Bruce's boyfriend, is killed by sharks for some reason. Yeah. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. It's average. Very average. The most average can get. I haven't seen The White Lotus, but I'm assuming the death thing has something to do with the show, because I was really confused the first time I watched this a few months ago, thinking, why did that happen? Because I had forgotten about the prologue by the time Jeffrey was killed. Don't know why he had to be killed instead of the other gay guys who we've never seen before. I don't think the episode even named them. Maybe they did, I don't care. Stewie's plot with these gay guys goes nowhere, and I don't think there was any substance to watch him boss Brian about for no reason. Meg and Chris's bit with the shoplifting was mildly interesting, had a few decent jokes, but it was a very small portion of the episode that only led to Brian drinking the beer and getting fired. The main plot is unfortunate, because really nothing happens. It's another, oh dear, is Lois cheating on Peter plot that doesn't matter, because she has done that already, and there's already been tons of episodes with this plot line. But this episode is different, because it feels like the episode is poking fun at the plotline by having Peter be so oblivious to an honestly out of character degree. And towards the end, it's revealed that Peter cares more about a cheesecake that Lois and Quagmire had eaten. But then Lois apologizes for spending time with Quagmire, so I don't know. Does it want me to take this plot seriously, or does it want me to treat it like a big joke? Now, let's get into the worst, absolute worst problem with this episode. How is this a Peppa Pig bookmark? That looks nothing like Peppa Pig. Like, what is that actually? What the hell? Who designed this? I sure hope someone got fired for that blunder. On to episode 16, Cool Hand Lois. After Lois walks in on Chris masturbating, Meg tells her that masturbating is not so bad and that she should do it. So she does, and this leads to her feeling she is more in touch with herself, and so she begins dating Bonnie. Fuck this episode. One of the worst episodes of the season. Having Meg persuade her mother into masturbating is not even surprising at this point. Like, I can't even be offended by that. It's one of the things that makes this episode bad for sure, but if this was like season 4 or 5, this would probably seem worse. But now it's just, well, that happened. Like, they had an episode where Stewie gets pregnant, an episode where Peter tries to marry Chris, and I'm pretty sure there was an episode where Lois gets a muscular body and Stewie starts being attracted to her, so this is nothing. Like, it's pretty tame compared to those other examples. Because this episode starts off with Lois learns to masturbate, it's really mind-numbing to get through 9 minutes of that before she finally meets Bonnie and decides to date her out of nowhere. They say it's because she's being more open to her sexual side or some shit, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's clear to see that it's just the show begging you to keep watching it. Later on, they have Peter see Lois and Bonnie eating dinner at a restaurant, and he remarks on how happy they seem, saying that Lois deserves happiness no matter what. It's a really interesting observation Peter makes, for him to realize that he's been a terrible husband all along, by seeing his wife cheat on him for the 100th time. And what did it matter if she was happy? For this episode, like, why does this scene matter? Peter cheats on Lois with Joe right after this scene to get back at them. Lois breaks up with Bonnie after not being interested in having sex with her and goes right back to Peter. So I guess they weren't that happy. I'm sorry, Family Guy, you can't make me take this ass pill seriously. I can't figure out what message this episode is trying to go for, because it says that cheating is bad no matter what reason or who it's with, but also kind of says that it's okay to cheat as long as it makes you happy. Like, what is it trying to say? By having Lois stay with Peter, not have sex with Bonnie, and have everything supposedly go back to normal at the end, it's like saying, well, she didn't have sex with her, so this can be forgiven. Like, nothing here was actually resolved. She still cheated with literally everybody knowing. Now, what are the jokes like in this episode? Well, we have Brian getting cancelled and fading away when he says that a woman cheating with a woman is still cheating. Is this really something people talk about? Am I out of the loop? I don't think people talk about this. You've done 2 fucking episodes about characters getting cancelled. That's enough cancel culture crap. We get it. It's bad. But is it really relevant anymore? Like, I think the last time cancel culture was relevant was 3 or 4 years ago. As for the other jokes in this episode, they were hilarious not. On to episode 17, Martian Meg. Meg wins 2 tickets to a Dua Lipa concert, but nobody wants to go with her, including Lois, who makes up an excuse that she's busy. But then, to Meg's shock, Lois appears at the concert with Donna and Bonnie. When noticed, she apologizes, saying that she couldn't say no the moment it was cheaper. Meg runs out crying and comes across a sign for a queue for people who want to go to Mars, so she joins the queue. Lois, upon hearing about this, decides not to push back on Meg's decision because she believes she only wants attention, but she is shocked when Meg is chosen as a winner and gets to go to Mars. When Meg begins to miss the family and is visibly regretting her decision, Lois tries to stop the rocket, jumping onto it and causing it to crash, but they are both rescued. Meanwhile, Stewie finds a new stuffed toy at Goldman's pharmacy and starts a throuple relationship with Rupert and the new toy. I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. This episode has one big issue that plagues the rest of the episode, and that is the way it is set up, with Lois seeming like she doesn't want to spend a mere second with Meg, and lying to her about why she doesn't want to go to a Dua Lipa concert, and then actually going to it in the end up because it became cheaper. It makes her come across as unreasonable and calls into question whether she's someone we should be sympathetic for later in the episode. It's also kind of weird that she never considered the possibility that she could see Meg at the concert and create this scene. This, combined with her not taking her daughter seriously when she says she's going to Mars because she thinks that not pushing back is good parenting, makes the payoff seem less gratifying. If she seemed like a better parent who actually felt bad for what she did earlier, then she would appear more sympathetic, and this ending would be better. It is decent, though, for what it is. Like, it doesn't completely fail. It's nice to see that she does care for Meg's safety. The only reason she stopped her from going to Mars was because she knew she didn't want to go in the end up. So it's not like she decided to stop her just because she didn't want her to go. The guy in charge of the space program, voiced by Keith David, was alright. Kinda liked him. He had a few funny lines, nothing major, just fine. Stew's subplot could have been cut out entirely because it's not funny, like at all. Because the stuffed toys do not display clear sentience, there is no actual conflict, nothing happens, and it ends
faster than an electronic rabbit.
Like halfway through the episode, because there's no material to work with. Clearly just filler. Comedy in this episode ranges from F to okay. The bit with Meg asking Quagmire and Herbert to go to the Dua Lipa concert was pretty funny, while the rest of the jokes were okay or didn't land. Oh, the bit about Seamus randomly appearing as he is selected to go to Mars and begins making a speech just to be rejected when the commander notices he has no arms and legs was pretty funny as well. One other thing to note, is this episode fucking using AI? Like, what is this? What is this world coming to?